Hey, DM Scotty here. Good to have you back. Today on Short Tip, I wanted to show you an interesting little way to make a template that would stay on the tile through the combat, or temporarily, depending on what it is. Today I'm going to make a web. So you could use this for like a web spell, or I was using it for giant spiders. So the spiders will shoot the web and it becomes difficult terrain. So I wanted to leave those on the board, and I made these quick and easy templates to do just that. So let's get to crafting. So here's my cardstock I'm going to use for this project. It's just a very thin cardstock. Now you can either just wing it, or you can draw some shapes to help you to help guide you when you do this with the glue gun, which I'm going to use. Now me, you know, I don't use grids, so I'm just going to do a circular shape, a roughly circular shape. If you feel like you have to use the grid, then you could use a ruler and measure out the squares. Probably for this project, at least 4 square. You want it to be at least 4 squares. So, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a circular shape, and this will be my web. And it's not perfectly circular, but you know, it's a rough circular shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill that in to make it look like a web, and we'll do that now. So I've got this really tight on here so you can see what I'm doing. Now my camera's in autofocus, so sometimes it might look like the camera's moving or focusing in and out. So I'll try to not block the camera too much or cause it to do that too much. So I'm using my smaller glue gun, and I'm going to start by squirting a glob in the center, and then kind of circular, with a circular motion, kind of filling that out. Okay, so I've got that part filled out. Now what I'm going to do is let this dry for a second, and then I'm going to do some more detail. So I've just let this harden up for about 30 seconds. Now I'm going to take my glue gun, my small glue gun again, and I'm going to start squirting a little bit in the center and then pull out, kind of in quick motions. So just in and out of the center. You're not trying to fill the whole thing in this way, you're just trying to drag some lines out from the center. This is going to kind of give it the webby appearance. Okay, so now we'll let that dry for a second. Let me give you a little close-up there, a little more of a close-up. Okay, you can kind of see, even though it's that transparent glue, you can kind of see the relief on that. So now I'll let that dry for a sec. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to cut this out. Now obviously when I would do this, I would fill this card with them. Then you'll have to do it once. If your spiders shoot a bunch of webs, then you don't have to worry about, you know, you'll have enough webs to use. So I'm just showing you how to do this, so I'm only making one. So I'll just cut this out, and then I'll go around the edge. You could obviously make this scalloped or whatever, you know, shape you want, or if you're using squares, you could make it in a square, but I'm going to make it in like an ovally shape. Okay, so there is my web. Now what I'll do is I'm going to base paint this with a black spray paint, and then we'll come back and finish up the detail work, and you'll see how cool this web will look. So here's our web, base painted black. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint it in 3 stages. First stage will be I'm going to use a camel tan. Then I will use just a plain white. And on top of that, I'm going to use a pearlescent to kind of give the strands that kind of luminous or kind of silky look. So those are the 3 colors I'll be using. So first off, we'll be using the tan. And I'm basically just using a dry brush technique. So you basically just get the paint on the brush. It's not a wet brush, so I'm going to use this brush here, just a bristly brush, and I'll get the tan, get it on the brush there, and now I'll apply it to the base. So I'm just kind of drag it over. So my goal isn't to fill in the whole thing. I'm just trying to get a general color on there. So you want to leave some black coming through. And so there we go. So we have the tan on there. Now I'll let the tan dry, and then I'll put the white on. I'll dry brush the white on. Now remember that you don't want to leave your brushes sitting out, especially when you dry brush, because the paint will dry very quickly on the brush. So always put it in your water, and I'll do that. Now what I generally do when I dry brush is I have several brushes ready. So I'll use the brush, and then I'll use another dry brush, a brush that doesn't have any water on it. If you if you put your brush in the water and then try to dry it off, it's generally not dry enough to do the dry brush technique. So I recommend using another brush. I'm just use the same type of brush. So we'll let this sit and dry, and then we'll put our white on. It should just be a few minutes. So here we go. Here's our dried web. Now for stage 2, I'm going to use the white. I'm going to use the same type of bristly brush. This is going to be a dry brush technique. I'm not going to add any water to the brush. I'm just going to pick up some paint on the brush. Okay. So now I'll just drag that over the surface. And see how that texture really pops out of there. You don't want to hit it too hard, but you want to get all those webs. Okay, so there we go. So we'll let that white dry, and then we'll add our pearlescent for the final touch to this web. Now for the last coat, I'm going to use that pearlescent. So I'm just using a chisel brush. And you could use the other brushes I use, but this is a little more control. So just get that pearlescent on there. And it won't show up very well on the camera, but it gives it a little bit of a sheen, like I said, like a silky sheen. So it looks more like a web. So there we go. Here's our web template, and I'll show what that looks like on the tile. Here we are, we got our tile all laid out. Our adventurers have meandered into the room. But they didn't really check the ceiling, so unbeknownst to them, there were some spiders lurking up there, and with riders, and the spiders end up dropping down on them. So now the spiders decide to shoot some webs at the players. So you just grab the template, lift your player up, put them on it, and then the other spider shoots the web too, so the same thing. So what I do is, if the player is immobilized, you note that for the player character. If they're not, then that area becomes difficult terrain. so that if they start in it or move through it, then it becomes difficult terrain. So as the battle progresses, there might be more webs that get laid down, so, you know, like this kind of thing, or, you know, like this. So as the characters, you know, as the web starts to build up, it gets more and more difficult for the characters to get around, so, or charge or anything like that. So that's how basically you can use those, and just make a stack of them, and then you'll have them for any battles you need with web. Or like I said, you can make the web spell with this. Just make it a larger template for the web. And there we go. That's the web in play. And we'll see you next time on Short Tip.